I'm a robot vacuum cleaner, so yeah, I got one gig. I suck up dirt, so pardon my inferiority complex about Geico, who does so much more. Like, not only could they save their customers money on car insurance, but they got fast and friendly claim service too, and an award-winning mobile app. Plus access to licensed agents 24/7. Who am I kidding? I can't even do corners. Uh-oh, choking hazard.
Popcorn kernels.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more. This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you, as I love to do every weekday, over the airwaves of ESPN Radio, the Stephen A. Smith Show. Number to call up, as always, is 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. On this particular day, lots to talk about on the NFL level. NFL playoffs that took place yesterday. I can't believe the miracle I witnessed. Minnesota beating New Orleans. I'll tell you why I'm so ticked off about it. We'll get into the Steelers. Days of the Steel Curtain are going, I can tell you that much. I'll explain why in just a few moments. Obviously, we're expecting to have Ryan Clark on the show at 30 minutes past the hour to highlight for us what transpired during yesterday's games in particular, but the weekend games throughout, because Philadelphia did beat Atlanta and New England did have the bye week that I thought they'd have by trouncing the Tennessee Titans. We'll get into all of that in just a few minutes and then some. But before I did anything, it's only appropriate to recognize that today is the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is Martin Luther King holiday. Take a moment, particularly if you're an African American, to pay homage and to give thanks to that man for all he stood for, all he represented, arguably the greatest civil rights leader in history, certainly one of the greatest civil rights leaders ever. On a day like today is not a day that I customarily feel the need to take off. I appreciate the fact that it's a federal holiday. It's certainly something that I endorse wholeheartedly. But in terms of my ability to reach millions upon millions of people via radio, television, and digital, I think it's apropos and take a moment to give thanks to a man that was such a fighter, such a warrior on behalf of all of us as citizens and human beings, to make sure that we have civil rights and that we're treated accordingly. I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today if it were not for the efforts and the sacrifices of somebody such as him, a great man that I honor and revere every day of my life. So I just wanted to take a moment to give thanks and pay homage to him for all that he's meant to all of us. And throughout this show today, particularly when we come out of commercial breaks, you'll hear some sound from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I hope you can appreciate where I'm coming from with all of that. 888-SAY-ESPN is the number to call up. That's 888-729-3776. It's time for some Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. I really don't know what to say. I cannot believe what I saw. I cannot believe what I saw take place in Minneapolis, Minnesota last night. After a putrid first half performance where Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints offense could do absolutely positively nothing. And Case Keenum with Stephon Diggs and Latavius Murray and the rest of the crew looked like gangbusters. What do you see? You see Drew Brees resurrect himself and remind the world of his greatness. That he is not somebody to be taken lightly. That he is not somebody to be summarily dismissed and counted out. And Drew Brees came out in that second half and put on a show. And as a result, a touchdown to Michael Thomas. Another touchdown to rookie Alvin Kamara. Okay? And obviously you just look at some of the things that they were doing. And ultimately him taking a 21-20 lead, overcoming a 17-point deficit. And then for the Vikings to turn around and to kick a field goal and to give themselves a 23-21 lead, but Drew Brees still had 1 minute and 25 seconds left. And that 4th and 10 play, when he hit Willie Snead on the sideline, and I just said, it's Drew Brees we're talking about here. It's Drew Brees. Don't you worry about a thing. I tweeted and everything. I said it's a tough one, but it's plenty of time, and I believe in Brees. I believe in Brees. And sure enough, he got him in the field goal range. 53-yard field goal. Connected. Saints have the lead. They're up 1. Defense just got to neutralize Case Keenum. And the next thing you know, with 10 seconds left, pretty much the last play of the game, all you got to do is let Stephon Diggs catch the ball and keep him in bounds. Make sure that he doesn't go out of bounds. That's all you had to do. Nothing else. You didn't have to block the pass. You didn't have to make sure it was incomplete. You didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was let him catch the pass and tackle him in bounds. That's it. Nothing else. And this rookie, Marcus Williams, is coming on too fast. He doesn't want to get called for a pass interference because that'll leave time on the clock. It'll give the Vikings extra yardage. It would make a field goal that easier, and as a result, they would lose. So we understand what he was dealing with. But he came on too fast, and as a result, felt the need to move out the way. And so what he did was he dived a little bit away from Stephon Diggs, basically in an attempt to undercut him if indeed he did catch the ball. And as a result, he ended up missing him altogether. Stephon Diggs adroitly makes the catch, keeps himself in bounds, and scampers down the sideline for a 61-yard touchdown play from Case Keenum as time expired to deliver the Minnesota Vikings the victory. And I must confess to you, I wanted to throw up. And by the way, one of the reasons was that damn NFL, a National Football League, and those suits in the league office who need to loosen it up. Take their belts, loosen it up, their jackets, loosen up. Get a life. Why the hell should the Saints have to come out for an extra point after a moment like that? The crowd is sheer pandemonium. The players are celebrating. The moment is not something you teach, nor is it something you can buy. But because the NFL is tight as Lord knows what, don't know how to relax at all, you're gonna make the Saints come back out so you can take an extra snap and the game could be over. Just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Just to deprive Vikings fans even more so of the moment they could have had, even though it was a good moment. Just makes no sense whatsoever. But that's what transpired. But the biggest thing for me, what really made me sick to my stomach, is the fact that Drew Brees is not going to be in the Super Bowl. Because, ladies and gentlemen, without him in the Super Bowl, you know what I have as a choice out of the NFC? Case Keenum or Nick Foles. Really? I mean, really? Why don't y'all just ask people to skip the Super Bowl? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if anybody's realized this, but you talk about Tom Brady holding the NFL in the palm of his hands. Could you imagine if the Super Bowl is Blake Bortles versus Nick Foles or Case Keenum? You talk about ratings plummeting. Not to mention the fact that Jacksonville's defense is elite. Philly's is damn near that way, and Minnesota's number 1. So could you imagine what the Super Bowl we can anticipate for the Super Bowl? It might go down as the most boring Super Bowl in history. Unless Tom Brady's in it. In case no one has thought about it, perhaps you should think about that now. 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. That's why I was so depressed that New Orleans lost. I'm depressed about the Steelers for a different reason. Mike Mitchell opening his mouth, Le'Veon Bell opening his mouth, them talking about everything but the Jacksonville Jaguars. That didn't help. And then talk about a defense that went out there and wet the bed. I understand that Ben Roethlisberger threw an interception. I understand that ultimately he had a sack fumble that was returned for a touchdown. I get all of that. He gave him 14 points. I understand. Really 7. Because just because you threw an interception doesn't mean that the Steelers couldn't have stopped Leonard Fournette, which they couldn't, by the way. 82 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. If he hadn't hurt his ankle, Lord knows how much yardage he would have had for the game. We can debate Mike Tomlin and that onside kick call. We can talk about Ben Roethlisberger and the turnovers. We can talk about Tomlin and his future in Pittsburgh for all I can. We can talk about all of that. But I tell you what you need to talk about. You need to talk about the heyday of this steel curtain and how that's been long gone. This defense intimidates nobody. This defense phases no one. And yesterday, it was more apparent than ever before. Blake Bortles' offense put up 38 of Jacksonville's 45 points. Blake Bortles. That's what the Steelers have to deal with this entire offseason. They gave up 38 points to Blake Bortles. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's most dependable 4G LTE networks. We'll continue talking on the Stephen A. Smith Show. We'll get into Atlanta losing to the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk more about New Orleans, Minnesota. We'll talk about Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. And we'll talk about how Tom Brady, more than ever before, is in position to be a savior for the National Football League. That and so much more coming up as the show progresses today. You are listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Back to football. Pittsburgh Steelers lose this game yesterday, and there's a lot of things that you can point to without question. Ben Roethlisberger had 2 turnovers, but damn, he threw for 469 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's hard to hold him primarily accountable for what transpired yesterday. If the Steelers had a defense, it wouldn't have came to this point. But their defense was highly suspect. With under 2 minutes remaining, a little over 2 minutes remaining, and Mike Tomlin in position to kick the football off, he decided on an onside kick. And he's taking major heat for that. In my opinion, I agree it was the wrong call. I would not have done it, but I can understand why he did it. It was 2:18 left in the game. Pittsburgh went for an onside kick after cutting the deficit to 42-35, despite possessing 2 timeouts with the 2-minute warning ahead. But Mike Tomlin didn't believe in that defense. And the reality is, who the hell should? I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers look so pathetic at times, they couldn't stop me. Now, obviously, you can't take anything away from Jacksonville. Leonard Fournette is a stud. I mean, he wasn't getting touched for the first 3 or 4 yards. He ran the football. And the minute he got touched, he dragged dudes with him some extra yardage. If he hadn't gotten hurt, I think Leonard Fournette would have had another 180-yard-plus game. I really do. He was that powerful. He was that punishing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Blake Bortles was impressive in the fourth quarter as well. He went through one stretch. He's 5 for 6 for 120 yards. Threw a 45-yard pass to Keelan Cole, setting up a touchdown that gave them a cushion after the Steelers were marching back. You know, play action fake, threw a 14-yard touchdown pass to a fullback in Bohannon. Offsetting spectacular touchdown catches by Antonio Brown, who, by the way, whose cast was not 100%, but he still had over 120 receiving yards. Martavis Bryant, that catch that he had for a touchdown to end the first half, that was impressive too. But in the end, what it comes down to is this. Ben Roethlisberger made mistakes. But Ben Roethlisberger balled. Antonio Brown balled. Le'Veon Bell, even though he shouldn't have been talking about his damn contract heading into the game, he still backed it up. He balled. Look at his yard from scrimmage. It's the Steelers' defense that didn't show up. You look at Keith Butler, I don't know what the hell's going on. Todd Haley with some of his play calling earlier on, trying to run a sweep against the speed of Jacksonville's defense, which, by the way, they saw it coming from a mile away. I don't know why the hell you would call that play. So there's a lot of blame to go around. Nobody's trying to absolve Mike Tomlin. He's the man. He's the head coach. Damn it, it's on him. Some of that play calling was on him. If you could have control over Ben Roethlisberger near the end of the regular season when y'all played New England, throwing an interception because he wanted to spike the ball and y'all wanted him to run a play, and he ended up throwing the interception. If Mike Tomlin can have something to do with that play calling, he's got something to do with some of the other play calling that took place. I love the guy, but I am worried for him because you got a lot of people that are looking at Mike Tomlin right now wondering what the hell is going on. When you got players talking out of pocket that way, that wouldn't happen with New England. Braggadocio being worn on their chest. That wouldn't happen with Bill Belichick. Hell, it wouldn't happen with Mike McCarthy. So these are the kind of things that you got to look at. Todd Haley's probably going to be gone. But they did put up some points, so it ain't all on them either. But this defense, I am sick of the Steelers' defense. No pass rush worth speaking of. Barely any pressure. And on top of it all, don't get me started with that secondary. Which is why I'm discussing that Mike Mitchell would be all emboldened by anything. I like him. He can play. He's not a scrub. But I mean, come on. Blake Bortles dropped 38. 38. If you're the New York Giants, by the way, how are you feeling about Mike Tomlin doing the job that he's done? Mike Tomlin probably deserved to be removed as head coach of the New York Giants, but maybe you should have moved him upstairs and gave him Jerry Reese's job instead of casting him out. Maybe that's what you should have done. Because looking at this Jacksonville squad right now, let me tell you something. They're going to give the Patriots hell. Remember, Jacksonville doesn't have to blitz in order to get at Brady. They can rush 4, drop 7 back into the secondary, and still do damage. You want to see what Brady's kryptonite is? There you have it. Blitzing Brady ain't gonna rattle him. Setting the house ain't gonna rattle him. But if you're able to apply pressure while nobody downfield is open, now you got yourself a problem. Speaking of all of those folks, always lamenting New England, Spygate, Deflategate, and beyond, they've been to 7 straight conference finals now. All I got to say is this. If Bill Belichick's cheating, here's my question. How come the rest of y'all haven't learned how to cheat like him? Can't beat him, join him. I'd have figured that out by now. But that's just me. 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. I'll get back to your calls in a minute. I'll get to your calls in a little bit, but not before I get to my man Ryan Clark, NFL analyst extraordinaire for ESPN. He's up next with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show right here on ESPN Radio. Always my honor and privilege to have my next guest on the line. Former Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's got a lot of explaining to do today. He really, really does. I'm talking about the one and only Ryan Clark, NFL analyst extraordinaire for ESPN. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm just trying to get over the loss from yesterday, man. I see that you're not taking it well.
I'm not taking it well at all, but we'll get into that in just a few minutes. The play of the day obviously occurred in Minnesota. Talk to us about what you saw from your vantage point about what happened with Marcus Williams, the rookie, making what I can't even classify it as a rookie mistake. I can't believe it happened to anybody. But explain to us what happened and what was your reaction when you saw that play that ultimately led to Minnesota escaping with this divisional playoff victory.
You know, Stephen, I'll be honest, man, I had chills watching the play because that type of excitement, that type of unpredictability is why we watch the game, why we watch it until the end. But when you're Marcus Williams, you know the call. They're in a cover 2 call, boundary call, where you're not going to let a guy catch the ball and get out of bounds and have an opportunity to kick a field goal. And I felt like he tried to play it that way. He got there a little early, and what happened at that point when he tried to make the tackle is unexplainable for me, and only Marcus can really answer that. But it's inexcusable. You can't do that whether you're a rookie or whether you're a veteran. And I think the play by Stephon Diggs, though, to not go out of bounds, to have the wherewithal to stay in bounds, get upfield, and score the touchdown was amazing. And to me, this really puts Minnesota in the driver's seat to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. A play like that, when you're on the Saints sideline, you think you've won the game. When you're Everson Griffin and the rest of those Minnesota Vikings, you think this is a last-ditch effort to just continue playing, not thinking that you'll actually score a touchdown. So to have that play happen is something that will be remembered by not only the people watching, but especially the guys playing the game.
I asked this question, and I'm shocked that I didn't see anyone on the air asking this question to guys throughout the football world in the aftermath of this victory last night by Minnesota. If you were a teammate, a member of New Orleans defense, a member of New Orleans, period, what would your reaction be when you walked into that locker room after a mistake like that by one of your teammates?
Well, I think it depends on which Ryan Clark you're talking about. If you're talking about the young Ryan Clark who was still trying to find his way, I'd probably be more concerned about what I didn't do correctly throughout the game that even led to that play. But as a veteran, and I've never had a play like that, but you've had plays to cost you games. Shoot, I've had plays to cost my team games. Like, you don't try to do that. Like, you don't go out and say, you know what, I want to miss this tackle, or I want to overrun this play, or I want to duck my head and not make this play. I was asked about it on Twitter last night, and I said the first thing you tell them is, hey, Rook, you had a great year. You're going to be an excellent player, and you're going to have many more opportunities to make plays like this. Be accountable, take responsibility, commend the Minnesota Vikings. I love you. Let's get on the bus and go home. And that's how he has to approach it. That's how you have to approach it as a veteran. You heard Cam Jordan say last night, I think about all the plays I could have made. As a player of my caliber, it shouldn't have gotten to that point. And Cam Jordan is taking the right veteran approach to losing that game.
I tell you, somebody else who's taking the right approach is another rookie, Mr. Lattimore, Marshawn Lattimore, because he basically said the same thing. He said the kid's a great kid. He's got a lot of talent, a tremendous upside. He was a second-round pick. He's in the starting lineup for us. He said, you know what, you just can't let it get it down. It was a devastating play, but he's got a bright future ahead of him. I thought that was the right attitude for him to take, but I tell you this much, I feel sorry for Drew Brees because at his age, in this game, with the greatness that he's put on display, particularly in the second half of last night's game, he's got to be wondering how many more opportunities is he going to have in his career.
Absolutely. I mean, if you listen to him talk post-game, it definitely sounded like he was very aware of that. He was very aware that there's not many teams you think have the capability of reaching this point. And for the last 3 years, he hasn't had a defense that would even give him this opportunity. So to be in this position, and not only be in this position as your team is constructed, but to be in that position in the game where you should have won the game and lose, and you know you have a Philadelphia team that is a little bit down without Carson Wentz. I mean, this is an opportunity that you're going to regret missing if you're Drew Brees. Because like you said, Stephen, at turning 39 soon, how many more opportunities would Drew Brees have to be in this position?
Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Let's get to your former team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tell me what happened to them. I'm looking at this team right now. My disgust is I just can't even explain it. On one hand, Mike Mitchell opening his mouth. Yes, he was alluding as he tweeted to the interview that had taken place weeks ago about Shazier when he was talking about the New England Patriots. He wasn't looking past the Jacksonville Jaguars, fair enough, but he sent the tweet in response to my diatribe against him. But he didn't send one to Teddy Bruschi or yourself or others who lamented him open his mouth, about before you played the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then the defense goes out. Yes, Ben Roethlisberger, a fumble recovery that was taken in for a touchdown. But outside of that, Blake Bortles and that Jacksonville offense put up 38 points on this Steelers defense. What do you make of that, Ryan Clark?
That the Steelers have to be better. I mean, for years I've been coming on the show and talking to you here on the radio, and we talked about the defense not producing. That was a prime opportunity to show up for your team. Ben Roethlisberger put up 42 points on the Jacksonville Jaguars, a top 2 defense in the NFL, and you can't stop the Jacksonville Jaguars enough to win. There was a point where they were down 7 in the fourth quarter, and they allowed Blake Bortles to engineer 2 touchdown drives. Those were the plays that the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to make on defense. And I don't know if it's personnel, I don't know if it's play calling. Obviously, the loss of Shazier looms very large on this defense, but to have those things happen, they're unexplainable, inexplicable, and you can't excuse those. And so as a defense, they have to get better, and they let the team down when it comes to those clutch moments in the fourth quarter.
How did that happen, though? Because you're hearing guys didn't trust that guys would be in there, do their assignments, cover the gaps and what have you. The team just seemed a bit discombobulated. Le'Veon Bell commenting about his contract coming into the game. Mike Mitchell talking about what they were going to do to the Jaguars the morning of the game. And then you look at Tomlin, obviously the onside kick or whatever, or more importantly, these guys' willingness to sound off, knowing that you put yourself in a precarious circumstances, and that's something that Mike Tomlin wouldn't like, yet it still happened. What's going on with your former team?
I think Mike T can't necessarily not like these guys talking about these things when for the first time ever since I remember him, he spoke about the future. He spoke about facing the Patriots twice. He spoke about having to play them in the regular season and then meeting them again in the playoffs. So as a team, if Mike T's coming out and saying these things out loud, I'm pretty sure these are things that are being discussed in the building. And I think the team kind of followed suit with that. On the other side, whether it's Mike Mitchell, Le'Veon Bell, or whoever speaks out, Mike T gives people the opportunity to be themselves, to be individuals, to be their own brand, per se. And so this is kind of what comes with the territory. It's not that New England Patriots, we're going to do everything this way and the way Bill Belichick does it. It's not really how it works in Pittsburgh.
Should we? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't necessarily know how much that plays into your preparation for the game.
How concerned, if at all, should any of us be about Mike Tomlin's future in Pittsburgh in light of the fact that, a loss like this, you got a lot of people looking at him, particularly after that onside kick. How concerned should he be?
I don't think he should be concerned in the sense that I think he's built up a rapport and a relationship with the Steelers organization to where he'll be all right. But I'm concerned. And,
why?
I know many times you and I get a little flack for how we deal with the quote unquote black topics. Yep. Right. But if you listen to just the people outside of us, right? Mm-hmm. When Mike Tomlin is spoken about, when is he ever spoken of as a great X's and O's coach? When is he ever spoken about as a great decision maker? It's always his personality, his charisma, his ability to lead, the way that he presents himself. But it's never about what he does on the headset. And I think when you have a game like this, when people already try to point out that you're not necessarily a great decision maker, I think that feeds into that narrative. And so for me, I am nervous for him in the sense of when does it all come to a head and when does the outside noise get cloudy enough or loud enough that they start paying attention to some of these losses and some of these downfalls to inferior teams and say, you know what, even though we win 12, 13 games, maybe Mike T shouldn't be our coach anymore.
Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. Look, before I let you get on out of here, a couple more questions. I considered New England having a bye week because I knew what they were going to do to Tennessee, and sure enough, it happened. And now Malarkey is out as the coach. Good riddance. He was 20-21 in 2.5 seasons coaching the team. I mean, he didn't do an awful job, but it ain't like he was a game changer. You know what? You can get another coach that could do that. But transitioning to the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles, Atlanta Falcons, I put that on Matt Ryan. Yes, this Philadelphia Eagles defense deserves a boatload of credit, but you're the reigning league MVP with the same personnel, Sanu, Julio Jones, Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman, and the boys. You have got to be able to put up more than 10 points on the defense if you're Matt Ryan.
I totally agree. As a defense, you give up 15 points to the Philadelphia Eagles. You hold in the red zone on a couple of occasions to give your team an opportunity to win. You have Matt Ryan, like you say, Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Taylor Gabriel, Freeman, Coleman. I mean, all of these weapons, and you only scored 10 points. You don't put up any points in the second half, and this is not new. for the Atlanta Falcons. The defense carried them down the stretch. It wasn't the offense making the plays that we saw them make last year that got them to this point. And when you look at that second half of that game, obviously, like you said, you give Philadelphia credit, but it was Matt Ryan's inability to create the big play that hampered this team all year. I think that actually bit them in the butt in this playoff game against the Eagles, which is why the Eagles are moving on and the Falcons season is over.
Who do you have winning the AFC Championship game between New England and Jacksonville?
I believe New England wins it, but it's not going to be what people think. The Jacksonville Jaguars are made to play defense against the New England Patriots, and I'm interested in see if Jalen Ramsey matches up on the outside when Gronkowski is split out. I think defensively they're going to give New England all they want. I'm just scared that Blake Bortles won't be able to make the plays he made against Pittsburgh or against Bill Belichick, Matt Patricia, and that defense in New England.
Philadelphia, Minnesota, in Philly, Sunday night. Who you going with?
Minnesota. Minnesota is going to be the first team ever to host a Super Bowl and play in it.
Ryan Clark, I'm going with Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia will beat Minnesota at home.
You'll be wrong, and we'll talk about it on Monday.
There you go. Don't worry about it, though. I'm not hiding. You better not hide either, because I couldn't find you for a couple of months with the Steelers. Couldn't find you for a few months. Appreciate you, bro. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir, always.
Take it easy, no doubt. Ryan Clark right here with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio. 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. You can catch him on NFL Live this afternoon, by the way. He's always doing his thing on that show. Definitely you can continue to catch me right here. We still got a lot more to talk about in terms of this NFL playoff week, and I'm still disgusted. I'm still so disgusted. Damn Steelers. And, of course, Minnesota being the luckiest team alive, for crying out loud. I wanted to see Drew Brees in the Super Bowl. I want to see a quarterback. Now I got Case Keenum or Nick Foles. What is this? Back with more in a minute, the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it! Got a lot of phone calls to get into in hour number 2, because we'll get more into these NFL playoffs. Thanks again to Ryan Clark for coming on the show. We'll continue talking about these playoff games that took place over the weekend, the playoff games that are ensuing. Jacksonville visits Foxborough against New England for the AFC Championship game at 3 o'clock on Sunday. A 6:30 game is the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Minnesota Vikings for the NFC Championship game. When a winner ending up in Minnesota for the Super Bowl, Minnesota's got a chance to be the first home team at to have a Super Bowl, basically hosting the Super Bowl. That's what it is. So it'll be real interesting to get into all of that. Of course, we won't avoid doing so at all. Lots of stuff to get into, plus Magic Johnson coming in the support of Luke Walton. The Cleveland Cavaliers are hosting the Golden State Warriors tonight. Rematch of the NBA Finals. We got to get into all of that as well. And I'll tell you why I think tonight's game for Cleveland isn't just a regular season game, or at least it should not be just another regular season game. It should be far more important than that. No question about it. That's the kind of stuff that we'll get into as the show progresses towards hour number 2. And again, we'll go to your calls at 888-729-3776. That's 888-SAY-ESPN. This is the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you live on a holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest civil rights leader we have ever known as far as I'm concerned. Hour number 2 up next with Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Attention shoppers, clean up on aisle 14. Clean up on aisle 14. Someone dropped a jar of pickles. Kosher pickles.
Beatboxing at a big box store. Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
A red minivan has the lights on in the parking lot.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Geico.